Yes.
There we go.
I was gonna say,
Woohoo.
just do
No. All right, after much ado about nothing there, let's go ahead and call to order this regular meeting on February the 7th of 2022 at 6:59 p.m. of the Round Lake School District 116 Board of Education in the Round Lake High School Media Center. If I can, let me get a roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley?
Here.
Mr. Dura?
Here.
Mr. Francisco?
Here.
Miss Lee?
Here.
Mrs. Larson?
Here.
Mr. Jewett?
Here.
Mrs. Klingler?
Here.
All right, first up is, as always, our Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we have a meeting agenda to approve. Any questions in regards to the meeting agenda? If not, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Larson, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Roll call, please.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Devera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. We have an approved agenda, and first up on that are communications to the board. And I believe we've got the equity update, and yep. Dr. Stephan, take it away.
All right, we're going to give this a whirl without the glasses, but just in case I don't see the text big enough over there, I brought them along this time. So thanks for having me back. I am here today to walk through an equity update at where we're at mid-year. The focus of this presentation is really going to speak to our equity committee that we lovingly call the Action Faction. So let me work through. There will be three different parts to the presentation. I want to start off with just kind of a review of our strategic plan goals in regards to equity work, and then I'll do my best to tie that to the work of our Action Faction team during first semester and then into what we're doing now in second semester. So first slide here on the strategic plan shows the goals for this year. And the first one speaks to making sure that we are implementing pieces that came from the equity committee. And if you recall, last year we had the equity visioning team. This year we've transitioned that team into an Action Faction team that staff and administrators had the opportunity to join. So we are still incorporating a means to get staff feedback and staff voice. The second goal speaks to continuing equity and diversity PD. We, as I've mentioned, are doing case study reviews with all of our staff within the schools. Our building principals received equity facilitator training in the effort to help them feel a little more prepared for these conversations. But I've checked in with all the buildings and we've done at least 3, if not several more conversations like this with our staff, just diving into these case studies and gotten really positive feedback that it hits home because they're all school examples. So it's been really helpful to drive the conversation. The third piece there then in the goal that is a new piece to the goal is making sure that we have data, like a plan to gather data and evaluate how we're doing as a district in regards to equity in our schools. So I'll speak to that a lot tonight in regards to the Action Faction work. So for a quick review with our equity definition for the district, it is equity is a commitment to justice, to a fair distribution of access, and to opportunity. The priority is to ensure all students an opportunity to achieve to their fullest capability. So then from there we have our equity vision. It's getting a little fuzzier now. and then it gets foggy. So what's better, right? At Round Lake Area Schools, we affirm the unique value and essential dignity of every child and adult. We challenge the systemic inequities in society that dishonor this belief, and we commit to transforming our educational system by living equity in all that we do. So from there, that takes you to the equity commitments and action steps. I know this is a pretty lengthy document. This was the document that I reviewed a little bit more in detail than I will tonight in the presentation back in the fall. But I wanted tonight to really help you see where we landed as an action faction team and really honing in that team's work. There's all kinds of work going on that I will review at the end of the year and kind of give you an overview. But it was important to me that our team of teachers and administrators have like a real clear focus connected to this. So this second equity commitment on there, let me get it so I can read it because I know that I won't be able to read it from that screen. That one focuses on, it says we commit to identify and challenge inequitable opportunities. I do think a lot of our work in the action faction also talks about potentially inequitable experiences that our students may have had. So then within that commitment, there's a couple of different, I think there's 4 action steps, but the 2 that we really are focusing in on is taking a look at like our student handbook, our procedures, our policies, just the systems that we have in place and making sure that those are not getting in the way of providing more access to students. And then the second action step in there was to make sure that we were facilitating student focus groups to get that student feedback as well, and just learn from our kids about where we definitely need to target some of our improvement. So that brings me to the action faction team. And there was a team of staff members last semester that broke into 3 different subcommittees. And the areas of focus within the subcommittees were, one was called Community Connection. The second one was a team that dove into looking at equity PD and kind of organizing those student focus groups. And then the third group did a behavior data analysis review. So that first team, the Community Connections team, was led by Heather Bennett and Eric Apgar, and they took 2 big pieces. On these slides, I won't read through everything, but it's important to note for this team that they first started with a parent-guardian needs assessment to get an understanding of what our parents wanted to know more about in regards to our schools and how we do things. So from there, then they built out a plan for 3 parent universities. Now, of course, the plan was that these would get running right away at first semester. That we came back in January. Unfortunately, COVID didn't allow us to quite jump in that quick, but we do anticipate if our numbers continue to move in the direction they're moving, we'll be able to kind of jump back into these again. But this is a team that Heather will be taking kind of out of the action faction and continuing to build. And I'll get to more like our second semester action faction focus, but this gives you an idea of what they learned from our parents. And she does have staff members that also want to continue to build these out with her. So then the second committee was titled PD and Student Focus Groups, and this team really broke into 2 groups initially, but once we got those focus groups up and running, they came back in and joined the PD group. And the goal for this group was to use student voice for the focus group piece was to be using student voice to improve student school experiences and to increase our access within our schools. So there's just a couple of pieces of information on this slide there, but in the end we partnered with Equity Literacy Institute and had 2 facilitators running these focus groups. We had a few run in the fall in November, and we wrapped up a couple more just last week within our middle schools and our high school. And what we'll get from that team at the Equity Literacy Institute is really just a recommendation from a district perspective, but they're also going to provide it from a school perspective, because there may have been some differences between the 3 schools that the principals may want to kind of tackle from a school lens, but I know there definitely will be overarching themes that we'll want to look at. It is important to note that they focused their questions, that when we were generating the question ideas with them, for them, and we kind of went back and forth and gave feedback, they wanted it to be through like their whole school experience. It wasn't like, what's it like at McGee this year, or what's it like at the high school as a senior? It was more, tell me about your school experience in Round Lake. And the kids were able to kind of share. So we will definitely get feedback on their elementary experience, even though we're only interviewing our middle school and high school students. So the second part of that team then was the PD group, and the goal for that group was to provide professional development materials on topics that challenge perspective through an equity lens with a focus on anti-bias education. And when I finish tonight, I have our draft 1 that I'll share with all of you. What we landed on, it was a lot of conversation at first about what do people need for equity PD, and that can get huge. And we narrowed it down that we wanted to just be delivering some like one-pager material on sort of our key beliefs, what's important to us, and then I can work with the team to build out what professional development sessions could look like, but we wanted that foundation. So our first equity one-pager, we're calling it, the title of it is What is Educational Equity? And it just outlines briefly what it might look like in a school and what it might feel like from a student's perspective. So that's just a one-pager with some information, and we know the upcoming ones will be topics like what is the difference between equity and inequity, and just a list of key terms and definitions, because there's lots of stuff out there, lots of words out there. So we're just kind of as a team building from there, what information do we need to get out to our staff? So then the final committee from the Action Faction team began that process I talked about in the strategic plan of developing the data review piece and having some measurement tools to take a look at. So they went through the process of deciding to look at behavior data. And their goal was to identify biases and inequities in our behavior system. Through an equity lens, they also wanted to be able to evaluate and potentially modify our current practices based on what they found. Now, diving into behavior data is a very, very deep pool of lots of different potential data that you could look at. So they kind of had to make a decision of exactly where did they want to target the kind of the dive, I would call, into the data. And they landed on wanting to choose behavior like codes or behavior infractions that were rather common and that could happen at like a regular classroom level. We didn't want to dive into the really serious consequence or serious behavior concerns at this point, because their goal was to be able to make a big impact in the classroom. So the behaviors they looked at, you can see in that action step number 2, were verbal altercations, misconduct, and insubordination. And those 3 behaviors, you also, I think you can just read those and go, man, that could get muddy. Sometimes for a teacher, it's hard to decide, is this a verbal altercation? Is it misconduct? Is it insubordination? So they wanted to kind of look at that too, to try to create some common understanding of when we select these particular codes. They also have the major challenge of deciding which demographics do we look at when we're talking about equity, and they landed on race. So there's still plenty of room and way more data for us to be diving into, but this was a really great start at just starting to look at where are there some potential opportunities for us to grow and improve. So through their work and through looking at the data, in December, they proposed at our final SIP day meeting in our showcase, they proposed what they were hoping that we could move forward with into the future in regards to taking a look at that behavior data. So you can see the list of items on there, quite a few things. The Universal Equity Checklist is the major piece that we are connecting to the PD piece going into this semester. So I'll kind of go back to that in a second. I already mentioned we wanted to define common language and definitions. We have a district Tier 1 intervention toolbox, but we need to do more. We need to do more training. We need to get it out there. So there were our pieces here. We have the Equity PD for staff. We've started. So again, there's things we want to keep going. The last one on there I thought was a really neat idea from them, and they wanted to learn from their peers. So it was if there's teachers that are doing restorative practices in their classroom, if they're working to really build these communities in their classrooms, how do I learn from my peers what it is that they're doing that's working? So that could be something we build out in the future as well. So to bring me kind of then moving into our second semester, I will speak to those action steps that came out of the behavior team. And like I mentioned, in second semester, I really wanted to make sure that there was a product at the end of the year that these teachers and administrators could be proud of. So I met with the admin that are in my action faction, and we kind of talked about what would work, which is why I said, Heather and Eric said, you know what, we can take this parent community connection piece, we can take it out of action faction, build those parent universities still with staff, but take that out of action faction, which then led us to saying, okay, we're going to hone in on this PD piece and this data piece, because that is what's in the strategic plan. So we decided from there that we're going to be focusing on, like I said, the action step of aligning our handbook, our procedures, our policies, all that kind of thing, using the data that we're collecting. And we'll build the PD off of the data that we're collecting. We do intend to continue focus groups. Whether or not we use Equity Literacy Institute, it's a great partnership, but it does cost us money. So I've paid very close attention to what they've done to see if it's something that we could do in-house. But I definitely think finding ways to keep hearing and learning from our kids is super important. And that really just kind of wraps up for you what the action faction work has been for the year so far and what we plan to do into second semester. So when I come back at the end of the school year, I plan to give a little bit more of a broader scope of like all the different things that are going on, and then what we would hope to do moving into next school year. So I think that covers it. I'll hand out your fun equity one-pager. It's good reading. Does anyone have any questions? Yep.
Maybe a side question, but
Yep.
what in the organization I'm with, as we do DEI work, we're finding out that there's other ripple effects that are happening. Have you heard or seen any ripple effects?
Can you give me an example of what you're thinking? Because probably, but
So there's some of the work that's focused specifically in these areas. Were you surprised about additional developments or additional?
So I think one thing that surprised me the most was I anticipated it being rather easy to get kids that wanted to jump into these opportunities. But for obvious reasons, I guess part of me was like thinking, duh, should have probably predicted this. But if you're feeling marginalized or at any point in your school experience it wasn't positive, you might not want to sit down and talk to people about it. So I know that our principals worked like crazy to try to recruit and find sponsors. And we did get kids in the end, but I think the effort they had to put into like helping them feel like it's going to be safe. I would especially speak to our LGBTQIA plus community. That was definitely a group that was a little bit more unsure about coming forward and being in a focus group. But even some of our other groups that we had a group of students who have IEPs that we met with Hispanic students. So it was interesting to me as far as like a ripple effect. I expected with everything out there now about equity that we're giving you a platform, you jump on it. And we got kids, but it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, I guess. Yep. Any other questions?
Hearing none, thank you.
Okay.
All right, next up on the agenda is the review of the FOIA report. Does the board have any questions in regards to the information presented? Hearing no questions on that, next up is contracts under 1,000. I'll jump in on this one just to make a comment. It's the title of the communication is contracts under 1,000, and it's exactly 1,000. So that's just me. I understand why, and I kind of get the concept of it. But again, contract just like the one we had a couple months back of the $990 one.
Yeah, noted. We'll make sure if it's 1,000, we bring it forward through with a formal memo. I mean, there has to be a cutoff somewhere, and sometimes we're going to hit right by the number. But yeah, it's noted. Thank you for calling that out. I think the team hears that loud and clear. So,
Anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none on that and having my handy dandy equity flyer, we will move on next to the opportunity for public comment. And members of the public may participate in public comment during regular board meetings by attending in person or by submitting an electronic public comment form. Please note that speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and a link to the electronic public comment form is attached in the documentation. Electronic public comments will be accepted up until the time the board reaches the public comment section of this meeting agenda, which is now. So I will ask, do we have any electronic public comment? No electronic public comment. Do we have any local public comment here in the meeting room today? Seeing none there, then we will go ahead and step up and turn it over to Dr. Mendoza for the superintendent's report.
So the first, thank you, Board President Francisco. The first item is not listed simply because I received more information today. It's on the information that we've been sending you on the DeVore lawsuit. Just to recap, on Friday, Sangamon judge issued a temporary restraining order and ruled on behalf of what amounts to about 700 students in 140 districts statewide, essentially not voiding the emergency order from the governor, but putting a halt on it, meaning that the reference plaintiffs did not have to mask, they did not have to quarantine, so the exclusion, and then I think we communicated this, there's actually 2 lawsuits, one with students, one with staff, and the third part was the testing requirement. Included in the lawsuit, the judge did not issue class certification, meaning that it only applied to the plaintiffs referenced in the lawsuit. Now, if you think about how school districts work, that creates some challenges in terms of trying to do things for very small numbers of kids, but that's kind of how everybody is reading the TRO. What created some confusion, and it still exists, is there were 2 footnotes in the ruling. They were not part of the ruling, but they were footnotes that essentially said that the individuals not referenced in the lawsuit, so those that are not not part of the group, can, quote, govern themselves, and that the districts can govern themselves. Well, think about how people can interpret that. So despite the judge not ruling on behalf of the plaintiffs as a class, meaning it only applied to the 700, different districts are doing different things. I'm sure you've read about it, you've probably seen it. The other thing that happened late Sunday is the governor extended the existing executive order through March 5th. And so I just want to be clear on how we're interpreting it, and then something that the board is probably going to have to do at some point in the next few weeks. If I would say that's a stretch, it's probably 3 to 4, if not earlier, is essentially we are not named as plaintiffs. We don't have any students named as plaintiffs. The executive order was extended, so we're staying pat with following the executive order. Prior to tonight, and I want you to know this has really helped our team, is this has been an operational issue for the last 2 years. We have kept you abreast of what we've done. We've communicated clearly, but essentially for the last 2 years, we've been operating under an executive order, right? So we're following the rules, basically. What we learned today is that at any point in time, if the executive order is overturned or left to expire, whatever plan we have as a district, the board is going to have to vote to approve it. So you're going to have to take action. So if you think about timing, the executive order expires on March 5th. A number of things could happen. Nothing could happen. The governor could let the EO expire on March 5th. He could also issue another one with different language that very similar to maybe what was done last summer, where masks weren't required but were, quote, strongly encouraged or recommended. I think we just call it like it is. That's tacit permission for like a mask optional policy. So what we're going to have to do is just monitor how it plays out. The next 3 weeks are going to be very busy. The Illinois Attorney General today is working to issue a stay on the judge's ruling, which would put a halt on it. So I think it does complicate things more for the districts and students that were part of the lawsuit. I wouldn't say we have it easy, it's just a little bit more manageable right now. But what I would tell you as a board, you should expect at some point to call, I wouldn't say it's an emergency meeting, but it'd be a special meeting at some point on or before the March 5th date, so that you can opine on whatever our recommendation is. So I just want to be clear with what's going on. I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding all these moving parts, if you have them.
I have one question.
Yep.
For the moving part. How does this impact our athletics with teams from other districts that may be coming with? I don't know if IHSA has separately issued anything, or if, teams from other schools that might be optional. I was
Yeah,
wondering.
so we would expect the athletic directors to be communicating, but what I would say is by and large, the plaintiffs that were referenced, if you think about it, we have 800 school districts, there were 700 total students. So we would have to be made aware of whoever, what the ruling was for a particular student. But in the end, our protocols and procedures that we have in place trump everything else. So we will follow what our current practice is. I don't anticipate any significant issues. I know that's not the case everywhere. I think as a group, a conference group, we work very well together. But that would be something that Becky would have to coordinate with the other athletic directors. So that's a great question.
Any additional questions?
Want to take the opportunity to call out and recognize the Round Lake Area District 116 Educational Foundation Grant Awards. Grateful for the foundation. Basically, I'm going to be reading a list of items that the foundation has funded in the amount of $1,621 in January. Erica Diaz from Murphy, We Thinkers. We Thinkers is a 2-volume series social emotional curriculum that teaches 10 evidence-based concepts for students aged 4 through 7. It explores important social concepts using storybooks followed by lessons and activities. Sarah Breen and Sarah Brzezinski Ives Pleviak, Ready to Learn Through Play. This grant will be used to add more items to the classroom to enhance play in the special education kindergarten classrooms. And last but certainly not least, Megan Haug, Indian Hill Art Club Enrichment. This grant will provide enrichment opportunities for students to explore art projects and media beyond what they are able to do during art class. Students will be working collaboratively and thinking critically to problem solve and create eye-catching and thought-provoking designs. The last one is very special. We'd like to take a few moments this evening to thank Bobby Calise. And I know she's embarrassed right now, but she's just going to have to take it for her service to Round Lake Area District 116 and the Board of Education. On behalf of the board and all who you've worked with over the past 5 years, we wish you nothing but the best on your new journey. Thank you for the support and dedication you've provided to each of us. Your professionalism, attention to detail, and ability to add a special touch to everything you do has made an enormous impact on the district and this Board of Education. Best wishes to you and your family as you head to sunny California. And I always try to think of how I would describe people, and you're just unbelievably kind. Just unbelievably kind and caring. And I think that's such a commendable attribute you have. You make people feel special around you. We're going to miss you. And so we just wanted to publicly recognize you for what is really your last board meeting. So thank you. We have something for you here. Board President Francisco, do you want to kind of... And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Mendoza. And again, Bobby, thank you very much from this board. The detail, the care, and the precision you put into everything you do has not gone unnoticed, and we will definitely miss you. All right, next up are committee reports. And I believe we had a community engagement committee update.
Yes, we did. So tonight was kind of just a recap of some of the things that we have been working on. In the packet, the first one on the agenda was the comprehensive community partnership programs. If you guys get a chance, pardon, if you guys get a chance to look over the packet, just kind of refresh your memory. We had a plan to basically in like November to review this like draft that we had set up and kind of connect up with the National Network of Partnership Schools, and it's affiliated with Johns Hopkins University. It's a partnership program that outlines research-based plan development and implementation for successful school partnerships at the district and school levels. Basically, basically we had this amazing plan that we set up, and we kind of are going to take a small step back on it because we wanted to sort of focus more on including the principals of the elementary schools and the school districts in general, or all the schools in general, in the plan. The partnership is basically taking a step back and then letting them also kind of build the plan with us. They're going to focus more on like the elementary schools to start with this one, and basically they're just going to kind of collaborate with them and then roll it out beginning of the school year coming up, just because we have kind of a lot going on right at the moment. So that's kind of the breakdown of that one. If you guys got a chance to look at it, I would definitely look at the packet. It was just kind of a update on it, if you guys recall. The second one was the social media work-based student program. This one I'm kind of excited about because originally we had kind of set it up where we are going to have several students kind of like assist us in setting up some of the social media outlets and kind of reviewing programs that we had in the school districts. We had originally 2 people involved, and now we have 3 students involved, right? But basically it's kind of designed to see if they will enjoy working in that kind of field, kind of give them some experience if that's something they want to do as a career path. But they're going to be basically doing about 30 hours per semester, and they're going to be highlighting specific clubs and activities. So each time that they work on, they'll pick a club and they'll focus on that and kind of highlight it in the social media spheres, and then they'll move on to the next one. So it's kind of nice because it's going to highlight different areas that different programs that we have that perhaps people aren't as knowledgeable about, but it's the students doing it in collaboration with the teachers, so that's kind of nice. The next one is the Community Partnership Round Lake Action Congress. Basically, in November we approved the civics course that was going to be kind of the community civics course, basically in partnership with Doug Barnshaw. They have, if you guys remember, he's the social studies department chair, and then Heather Bennett, of course, was helping with that. But basically, they're doing a partnership where they're collaborating with local community leaders. So they have Lake County Forest Preserve, Avon Township, Round Lake Beach Police Department, Round Lake Area Exchange Club, and then obviously the Education Foundation, which has been amazing, and our partnerships. And it's just kind of going to be a conversation, like a dialogue that takes place specifically with the Action Congress from grades 5 through 12, and then those partnerships, those mentioned partnerships, that we're going to just kind of collaborate on, like community engagement and getting people involved. So there's lots of different things that they have planned for that. Excuse me. But they've actually had a lot of interest from the community in that area in collaborating with that. So we actually had to like limit the amount of people that were interested in it. But that's going to be approximately, like I said, the 5 community partners, and they're going to be starting at this coming up school year again. And then the last one is just the social media analytics. There's actually a lot of good things happening on the analytics reports. We've seen kind of a large increase in people responding to the posts that we do. They're going to reset some expectations on the amount of posts that they're supposed to do for the years, for the time frames that they're supposed to do. But overall, there's been a lot of improvement in our parents looking at the social media outlets. We did discover that Facebook is our biggest area that people are actually looking at things that they're posting. So then followed by Instagram and then Twitter, which I was actually surprised about myself. So they're going to be focusing on upping the interest in Instagram. But overall, it was very impressive. It's been very consistent in some of the numbers. So, Heather, I'm sure you probably have stuff to add that I've forgotten, but do take if you get a chance to look at the packet. There was a lot of good information in it. Any questions?
I do have actually a couple of questions. On the social media work-based student program, is there 2 or 3? Because the memo said 2. Is it 2 or 3?
It was 2 initially students, but there are 3 now.
So do they get class credit, or is it like a no?
No, this year we didn't build it out as an actual credit. We're starting it out this year, seeing how things are going, and we'll build upon it for next year. But right now, I don't believe we're at the point where we could really offer a credit. We are looking at other options at the end of the year to recognize their work in a different way. But again, working with Dr. Rowling and the high school team, we'll look at how things will roll into next year with that work.
So what is the max capacity? Since it's not like a class and it's more like an extracurricular, I guess, or like club based, it seems maybe. Is that maybe a kind of a way to look at it? What is the max we could do? And how are we, I saw that letter. Is that how we're recruiting them? We put that memo out in the high school?
Yeah, so we worked through one of the teachers at the high school, Carolyn Corcoran, within the digital arts program, and she targeted students that she thought might be interested in it. We started out with a max of 4, and we had 3 that were interested in it. So as of last week, we had formally met with 2 of them, and last Friday we picked up the 3rd. So that has started. It's basically about an hour a week that we'll be working with them. We collaborate with them through Microsoft Teams and in-person meetings as well.
Yeah, that's my next question. Like, how is the collaboration work? Okay. One more question. So on the social media analytics, I see, like, so I'm going to use the Facebook likes, the annual increase, and you see that where you see athletics has this huge jump, but could we see it like more of a cumulative? Like, so I see the athletics for January, February, March, like all together to see that ebb and flows in the posts that they do.
Sure, we can go back to the beginning of the year and show the monthly posts by school and program.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because it would help us to see the ebb and flows and where maybe we're seeing a trend or why we know in the summer our posts are low because obviously we're not in session, or December with it being a shorter school month. But it'd be nice to see that comparison for each one that you have listed over the course of the year to really get that true analysis of the program trends in our social media post.
Sure, we'll report out on that next month.
And then one last thing with the analytics. So like Jennifer said, Facebook is our strongest platform that we're using. Are we keeping track of how many followers we have on each of those platforms? And then what are we doing to increase? Because I think Twitter is probably more for the students, the younger generation. And even though they're more going to TikTok, but that's not a platform we use. But how do we make sure we're really targeting who we're supposed to be targeting for those platforms?
Sure. So across the board, it looks like Facebook, followed by Instagram, followed by Twitter. Even looking at the packet, there's some peer research in there about which age groups follow which platforms, and even that Instagram is ahead of Twitter with the high school age range of students that we're referencing. So what we've done is two things. So what we noticed this last month in the analytics is that we're not consistently posting to all three of those platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So we've had some connections with the webmasters to ensure that those posts are going out to all three of the platforms regularly. So when you look at the analytics with the number of posts, there is some disparity with Instagram and Twitter. So that will be corrected going forward, making sure that they have the tools and knowledge of what the expectations are for posting to all of those platforms. So that will hopefully boost in those other areas. Additionally, I haven't put it out yet, but at the beginning of the year, Katie Holland, our digital media specialist, had created QR codes for each of our school accounts. And we'll be posting those or sharing those out with our principals to put out in their monthly newsletters as well, so they could just do a quick scan to follow on the different platforms at those schools.
Yeah, that'll be good. But yeah, you're right, because I do see that inconsistency. You might see it on Twitter, not Instagram, or Instagram, not on Twitter. So it's good that we recognize that and we're working to correct that. That's all I had.
I've got a question about the community partnerships, the Round Lake Action Congress. There was a statement that there was a lot of interest or involvement. Where was the interest and involvement? Is that in the community partners?
Yes, so we've had several meetings, Doug Barnshaw and myself, with different community partners that we thought might be interested in jumping on to this initiative heading into next year's development of the community civics course. So the five that Mrs. Klingler had mentioned, through those conversations, it was, Judy Armstrong is always there as part of two of those partners, but she had ideas like, oh, well, what about women, League of Women Voters, and what about this, and what about that, and Michelle Bauman at Avon Township as well. So we know there are a lot of opportunities out there to help us grow those potential partnerships in the future, but we do want to limit it to some degree at the start of the year as we develop out that course to make sure it's not getting too big. We want to make sure we're doing it right as we add into the school year. And it is a one semester class, so we want to make sure that the timing and planning is well developed before we open it up to more partners.
Anything else? Thank you very much for that great update. All right, looks like we are next up to the approval of open meeting minutes.
Right. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the January 24th, 2022 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Larson,
Abstain.
Mr. DeVera,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
And motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for the accounts payable report for $940,303.38. The February 7th, 2022 employment report.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mr. DeVera. Roll call, please.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. DeVera,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
And motion carries. Right, next up we are to new business.
Yes. I need a motion to approve the recommendation of the administration to approve monetary increases for the years 2022 through 2023, 2023 through 2024, and 2024 through 2025 of the 2021-2025 collective bargaining agreement with the Education Association of Round Lake, IEA, NEA, as ratified by the union members on Tuesday, February 1st, 2022, as listed in the executive content.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Francisco, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Devera,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco.
Yes. And the motion carries. All right, next up, we've got the first reading of board policies. I think Mrs. Bennett is going to give us a rundown to kind of point things out, and if anybody has questions, we know who to talk to.
Okay, so in the packet, we broke things down as we normally do with board policy, ones that have minimal changes and then some that have more significant changes or things to note. So I can go through each individual one if you would like, or I can just ask if you have any questions about those are listed.
Okay, I'm just going to ask, for me personally, just kind of give us the highlights of the key ones, so to speak. Because I read a lot of them, and some of them are key, and some of them don't seem so key. So.
Okay, so I would say if we're going to look at one, it's curriculum content 660. So there was more to it than I actually listed in the memo here, but the big ones that I called out had to do with anti-bias education. There was a question related to that. In all of these cases, I think with even the other policies that have questions for us to respond to, I believe we went with the default language for all of them. There is the playtime, the required playtime under curriculum content, the new standards for the sex education programming. So Susan, help me if I'm misspeaking, but at this time, there have been the NSES, so the new standards have been released. However, ISB has not formalized those standards for our school district yet. So as we are right now, we're continuing to operate as we have. There's no necessary change to board policy at this time. And as those standards are released to us through ISB, we'll provide any updates should there need to be any. But as for now, we're continuing as is.
Thank you for that. Thank you for those clarifications. And I don't have any additional questions, but I would ask the board. Hearing no additional questions, thank you very much, Ms. Bennett. And we will move on to the middle school and department chairs. And Dr. Rowe.
Good evening. I'm coming this evening to talk about what we think is going to be a really innovative and impactful opportunity to switch up the leadership model at the middle school. As you may know, in 2018, Round Lake High School went to a department chair model, which really is become a partnership between the administration and EARL. These are EARL members that serve in a teacher leadership position where they are both leading departments and evaluating other EARL members. We find that this model has led to some significant instructional change, curricular change, and we believe that the evidence for that model is in our student outcomes at Round Lake High School as we presented in the past. We want to take that model and expand it down to the middle schools, where we would be proposing 6 department chairs at each middle school to cover ELA, social studies, science, math, special education, and language learners. We're also proposing the addition of 3 6-12 department chairs that will serve both middle schools and the high school in the areas of world language, CTE, and fine arts. The cost for this proposal is $131,775 in stipends. Dr. Center and I ran the numbers, and even though that these people would have a reduced teaching load, we do not believe we would have to hire staff to backfill those positions at this time. One of the benefits is it does come at a price reduction by reducing the content area chairs that serve in a different role. We would be able to reduce $320,000 in staffing, which would result in a savings of about $188,225. Are there any questions?
I just want to color this a little bit too. The timing of this is not ideal. We want the board to know that we are building the budget right now. But part of why we're bringing this to you tonight is because of the need to backward plan. Mid-April is the RIF deadline. Typically every year when we're making staffing decisions, we bring those forward at the end of March. If you start thinking about these positions, if we fill them internally, we have to backfill. So for example, if we have a high school math teacher who wants to apply for the math department chair, he or she can. Well, if that happens, and we have to backfill that with a job, and on and on and on. So we plan on bringing our budget assumptions to you. This will be part of it. This won't be the last time you see this, but it's part of the full budget picture. The reason I suggested we do it now is because we've got to build a candidate pool. It's February. The net result of this is not the driver of this decision, is there's a significant cost savings. That's an added benefit. But we're very excited about trying to align what we're doing in the middle with the high school. And I will say, I've been doing this for a long time. If I'm a middle school principal anywhere, I don't think I see this level of support for teachers in any district that I've ever worked in. So I'm very excited about it. What we're respectfully asking, we don't want this to be a common practice, is this is for discussion tonight. We'd like to ask you if you would allow us to post it as anticipated because of the timing issue. If we wait till February to get the approval, then it has to be posted for 5 days. Then we have to run the interviews. So the plan would be just to build the candidate pool, and then at the second meeting in February, we would bring the formal approval with the personnel inventory increase, decrease to achieve the net savings. So that's why typically we don't like bringing things one off. And I think what I would say last year was a little bit of an outlier because we had the grant money. I mean, if you remember, we were bringing 40 positions, and I don't see that happening next year. It better not. So anyway, if you would consider that, we would appreciate it. We're not asking for a vote tonight, but at least if you could allow us to post it to see what the interest is, because I do think there'll be high levels of interest.
And in clarification, the asking for it now is really, you're only talking about a 2-week window because you're going to be bringing that to the second meeting, which is 2 weeks from today.
Correct, and we'd only be looking for a nod to post it. That's really it. We wouldn't offer it. We wouldn't extend a contract until after you formally approved. And if for some reason you voted no at the next meeting, then we wouldn't do anything.
I think it's a great idea to have our middle school aligned with how our high school is aligned with the departmental chairs. And I'm assuming then our middle school and our high school chairs will be able to collaborate and really bring that alignment by having the same setup at the high school and the middle school.
Our plan is to develop a standard meeting structure where we would include the content coordinators, the department chairs, and the specialists, along with building leadership so that we could build that. Our goal here is to really build a cohesive 6-12 experience for our students so that when they move from one grade to the other, it just flows.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's what I see here in your proposal. So I mean, I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to make sure that's, kind of hear that, I guess, that's what the goal is.
Any additional questions? All right, so I was just going to get to that. So are we? No, I can hear from Annette and myself, definitely an alignment there, but want to make sure that everybody else has had a chance to ask questions to make sure.
It doesn't flow now?
It does. We have the structures in place. We believe this will provide more in the building support and in the building leadership for these departments. So right now we have a content area chair that's split across the 2 buildings. We don't have any content area chairs in non-core areas. So I don't want to imply it's not flowing. It is, but we believe this will help provide a greater level of consistency.
So and I also think it depends on what you mean by flowing, right? But the curriculum assessments, right, instructional practices are aligned. What we're trying to align in addition to that is the leadership structure. So one of the things that high school teachers benefit from is somebody who is a lead and a support who also teaches. So they have, confidence and belief, like you're going through it with me, we're all experiencing this together. And that we've gotten a ton of positive feedback from the high school staff on that particular process. And so they have support basically in every department at the high school. The middle schools have only the 4 current content chairs. They work in both schools and they're only for the 4 core subject areas. So then this allows us to expand that teacher leadership, both opportunity to people who are interested, but also support for then the departments on a much deeper level. So that then helps sort of tie those other pieces together. And then the conversations become cleaner between the middle schools and the high school.
So looking around, I see pretty much everyone is in agreement to go ahead and get started with the posting.
I really thank you sincerely. I think I just want to be clear, the secondary benefit, no pun intended, is the cost savings. I really feel like this is a programmatic improvement for less cost. Like, I don't know how else to say it, so.
But even with the savings in place now, if the enrollment trends reverse back and we start growing it, we're just going to put those positions back in place anyway in order to handle the teaching part, in order to take care of the kids anyway, correct?
Well, assuming you just have to remember, and I'll just call this out, at the secondary level, a full teaching load is 5 sections. So theoretically, we could grow in enrollment, still keep the department chair structure at the middle school, but you'd add FTE to cover the class sections in a way. It wouldn't necessarily mean that we have to add more department chairs. So
Thank you. All right, sounds good. Thank you, sir. Next up, we will go with positive occurrences. I know we have a ton of them, so I will actually start really fast. I'm just going to hit 2 levels, which is our athletics. I'm just going to talk about girls bowling and about boys wrestling, and then I'm going to turn it over to everybody else to have the different sections. I'm going to start with girls bowling. They had their regional over at Grays Lake North. Well, actually, we were at Lake Curtis Small, but that's a different story. But congratulations to Carly Lauritsen on an 8th place finish in that regional. She will be moving on to the Buffalo Grove sectional next weekend. So again, this is about the 5th straight year that team has sent a bowler to sectional or beyond, which is a great job, a great growth in that program. And they enjoyed that. Boys wrestling had their regional championship over at Libertyville on Saturday as well. Congratulations to Grayson Concacal. He actually won the regional championship at his 106-pound weight class, our first regional champion since I believe, 2016. Something in that ballpark. So great job there. He and two other wrestlers, Alejandro Cordova, who finished second at 113 pounds, and Aiden McCain, who finished second at 182. All three of them will be moving on to the sectional tournament at Buffalo Grove. And will be wrestling for us. And in addition, we also had three alternates for that sectional tournament. Eric Tellez, who finished fourth at 285. Ricardo Martinez, who finished fourth at 126. And Nate Tharp, who finished fourth at 145. So in essence, we had six wrestlers who reached out and made it to that next level, to that sectional level. So looking forward to seeing how they do next week. And continuing that growth as the programs continue to develop.
Okay, I have a whole host of things. So, they had the variety show on Friday and Saturday, and I thought it was just an amazing job. It's funny because the kids will get up and sing or dance, and sometimes their nerves get the better of them. But I actually thought every performance was just amazing. All of it was. They were very composed. They just did a great job, all the kids. So I was really proud of them. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention guard. So the JV actually went. They had a competition on Saturday, and they placed fifth. And then the varsity placed first, actually out of 9 teams. So, and that was the first time that they had a head competition in, I think, 2 years. So there was a lot of emotions. So it was really nice, and they were complimenting the other teams, so it was good sportsmanship as well.
Well, of course, girls basketball, they are LCC conference champs. So we have another team. So, the last 2 years was the boys and now the girls this year. So that's 3 years in a row that our basketball program has produced a conference championship team. So congratulations to the girls, the coaches, and the families that support them. So the game tomorrow is at Grays Lake Central. If they win that, then it's not a shared title. We own it outright. So
minimally it's shared.
minimally it's shared. So they did cut the net on Saturday. I think hopefully somebody posted pictures of that because it's a wonderful opportunity for our team. And so it is shared, but if they win tomorrow against Grant, then it's ours outright. It's ours solo. So come on out tomorrow to Grays Lake Central and support the girls at 7:00.
Our chess team is going to state. The chess team?
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And just a touch on that. This is the third year that the chess team's been in place, third or fourth. It's very new.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's still a brand new group, and they're reaching out and they're going to state in their third or fourth year. So, and on top of that, with COVID having happened in the middle of all of that too.
And it was nice to see about the debate team as well. So I think I love seeing that stuff.
And I'll just throw it out there since anytime that we have talent show people that try to cover Stevie Nicks, that takes talent just to be able to even reach out on Stevie Nicks. Just saying.
That's my kid, everybody. That's my kid. My subtle ode to my daughter.
All right, any additional? I think everybody's kind of gone around the panel here. All right, then next up will be future agenda items. Anyone have some future agenda items they want to get out on the table? I think Dr. Mendoza beat us to the future agenda item by telling us to be ready the first part of March. So there you go. All right, then next up we will look for some approval of closed session minutes.
Yep. I need a motion to approve the closed session meeting minutes of the January 10th, 2022 regular board meeting.
So moved. Sorry.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mr. DeVera. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Devera,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco.
Abstain. And motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the closed session meeting minutes of the January 10th, 2022 expulsion hearing meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Larson, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Devera,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Abstain.
Mr. Francisco,
Abstain.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett.
Yes.
And motion carries. All right, well, that will bring us to the end of this regularly scheduled. We're going to move into closed session. So I will need a motion to convene in closed session as permitted by statute 5 ILCS 120-2 for the purpose of discussing employment matters, 5 ILCS 120/2C1, and closed meeting minutes, 5 ILCS 120/2C4. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Second.
Who is the motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mrs. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mr. Devera,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler.
Yes.
Motion carries. We will now move into closed session. That brings us to the end of the public session for tonight. Thank you all for attending and joining online. And we will be back in 2 weeks. Thank you.